We ready? Ready? Order. Mr. Will Forster to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Weston. I called this debate because of a 10-year-old constituent who was abused, tortured and murdered by those who should have loved and protected her. Her name was Zara. She was found dead in the early hours of August the 10th, 2023. Her body was covered in bruises. She had a traumatic head injury, human bite marks, multiple broken bones, and she was burnt by domestic iron. Next to Zara's body, the police found plastic bags, packing tape and a cricket bat, all with Zara's blood on them. The people who did this to Zara deserve a special place in hell. Zara's death was not a one-off tragedy. It was the most extreme and horrific consequence of children's services being hollowed out, being fragmented and weakened over years. Surrey County Council are failing children, left, right and centre. Another example is what happened to my constituent, Julia. Her and husband pleaded with Surrey County Council for help with their daughter, Eloise, who had special educational needs. Surrey ignored those pleas, refused to give her SEND support. But eventually, they took the parents to court because they were concerned the parents were a safeguarding risk against the daughter. The court saw through this and sided with the parents. And the court said that it was Surrey's lack of support for special educational needs that was failing the child, not the parents failing the child. Appallingly, Surrey tried to cover up their problems with special educational needs provision and push it onto a safeguarding failure. Next, there is another one of my Woking constituents, Judith. She was breaking up with her partner following many incidents of domestic and child abuse. She feared for her children's safety if they continued to see their father. On advice of Surrey County Council, the family court gave the father visitation rights. Heartbreaking abuse followed. The court then took away the father's rights to see the children. This is why we need to end the presumption in favour of parental contact. Abusers should not care for their children. Surrey are now insisting that the father starts seeing the children again. Surrey say they have a duty to explore if contact would be safe by reintroducing the children to the father. It looks like Surrey is rolling the dice and creating situations in which children can be harmed. This is supposed to be one of the most affluent areas of the country, yet our services, my services for my most vulnerable constituents, are like this. The day before Zara was murdered, Surrey's Children's Services turned up at the wrong house due to an administrative error. In another one of my cases, the council failed to show up to a promised meeting regarding a child's care. As a result, this child did not get the support they need. There are real-life consequences for their incompetence. In November 2025, the Child Safeguarding Practice Review that I called for into Zara's murder was finally released. It confirmed exactly what I feared, that the state, especially Surrey County Council, failed Zara at every stage. All the warning signs were there. They were not acted upon. The authorities were fully aware Zara was at risk. She was placed on a child protection plan before being born, yet was a victim of domestic abuse from that day onwards. Surrey's social workers wanted to take her away from her father, but they changed their mind, and that was a consequence that will haunt us all. After Zara's murder, the senior officer responsible for Children's Services at Surrey County Council, Rachel Wardell, was offered and accepted a pay rise of £8,700. I don't know how that woman can sleep at night. It sends a message that failure carries no consequences. In fact, it's a reward for failure. But the safeguarding review did also highlight there were national issues as well. Surrey's Children's Services, Children's Services in 1 in 5 local authorities across the country are rated not good enough according to Ofsted. There's a range of spending across local authorities. In York, they spend £35 million and are rated outstanding. But just down the road, in, I admit, slightly larger Bradford, the authority spends £262 million and are rated as inadequate.
With my honourable friend.
I will give way.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend who is making a very serious speech about very serious issues, and I commend him for not apportioning blame across the board to any one side or the other, and understanding that in different circumstances there are different reasons to blame. On the funding that he raises, would he agree with me that the removal by the government of the uplift funding for the most remote authorities will have an effect on children's services, as it will on SEND, as it will on a whole broad range of council services? In Somerset, for example, it's 53% more expensive to provide home-to-school transport than in average authorities, yet that uplift funding has been removed. Would my honourable friend agree that that is a shocking way to treat our most remote authorities?
Thank you, Mr Weston. I do agree with my honourable friend from Taunton. Funding is an issue, but it isn't just an issue. I am concerned we are not properly resourcing our Children's Services Department. The recent government decisions to shift funding away from rural constituencies like his could have a dramatic impact, and the government needs to recognise that in different parts of the country there are different funding challenges. And obviously a suburban, urban seat like mine has challenges, but it will clearly be easier and cheaper to travel around compared to his.
Would you give way on that point?
I would, yes.
I'm really grateful to my honourable friend for making a really, really important speech, particularly on behalf of his most vulnerable constituents. On the point we've just been discussing, would you agree with me that rural, very sparsely populated authorities are able to deliver good quality children's services, but only if special educational needs provision, health integration, transportation are treated as kind of national responsibilities, not afterthoughts, as they so often are? And on the funding piece, West London Furness Council will receive a funding cut. This year we're on £535 per head. In 3 years' time, £380 per head, a 29% cut in 3 years. Does he agree, or would he share my fears that that puts the safety of our children, particularly the most vulnerable ones in West London, at risk?
I completely agree with that, and I think this is the reason why I called this debate. We are not spending enough on vulnerable children. What's happening in Westmoreland with that funding cut is absolutely shocking. I highlighted the example, Mr Weston, of York and Bradford. They're two cities in the same region. We really need to end that postcode lottery on the life of children. These children shouldn't be living with that abuse, their neglect and their fear. But in awful situations where they are, we need local authority children's services to have their back and step in and protect them. Nowhere is that failure more despicable than in Conservative-run Surrey County Council. My county council was rated good by Ofsted in March 2025, a decision that many, I know, fellow MPs, many of my constituents and those across Surrey find bonkers. Despite this good rating, it's clearly a thin veneer that covers up for the rot within. There are 66 local authorities in Surrey rated, there are 66 local authorities in England that are rated as good. Based on what I know and what I've just told you about Surrey, if that's good, what on earth is happening in the rest of the country? The Children's Commission has been clear about this. Her research shows huge regional disparity on children in need plans. In some areas, children receive early intervention and regular checkups. In others, pointless bureaucracy, long waits and revolving door social workers who are poorly trained and poorly supported. Children's services and local authorities cannot protect children because of significant loopholes in the home education system, as highlighted by Zara's safeguarding review. It proved that Zara's murderers used those loopholes to hide the abuse. When they could no longer hide the abuse from the school, Zara's father and stepmother took Zara out of school, saying they were going to homeschool her. The school could do nothing about this. The abuse continued, and there were tragic consequences. The Liberal Democrats have long campaigned for a homeschool register to ensure that we know where the hundreds of children across the country are. We know that they're safe. Some of them have never attended school, not once. We need that register of children not in school. This is backed by the NSPCC. This is backed by the Children's Commissioner, who have said that this would be an important step, an important tool to keep children safe. I think homeschooling can be hugely advantageous, and parents have a right to choose it. But we need to have that register. And above all, parents should lose that right to homeschool if there are safeguarding concerns. It's clear from Zara's safeguarding review that repeated failures to share information is one of the key barriers keeping children safe. The Liberal Democrats have long been campaigning on this for years. We need to provide joined-up support to meet the needs of children. This mechanism, known as the single unique identifier, would really help this situation to ensure there's no more appalling safeguarding cases that I've highlighted. Every area in our country needs to have a multi-agency safeguarding hub so that all organisations can work together, share vital information, and above all, protect children. A key example of this is Zara's father and murderer. He was a taxi driver who passed a DBS check. He got his licence through Woking Borough Council, the licensing authority in my area. Yet Surrey County Council's Children's Services knew he was a child abuser. You could see it's foreseeable that he was driving around children with special educational needs or other vulnerable people, including for Surrey County Council, as they use taxi drivers for home-to-school transport. Why are we risking the lives of vulnerable children because the computer says no? We need to share that information. And then this government's recent spending review agreed a real terms cut in the grant to local authorities for children's services. I think that is appalling. We should not be cutting this. We should not be putting a price on a child's life. In conclusion, Mr Weston, my ask to the Minister are this. We need better joined-up public services where information is shared quickly and effectively to prevent children being put at risk. To ensure that local authorities are well equipped to deal with the upcoming changes in the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill so that no child falls through the cracks. And I would ask him to agree with me that something is clearly wrong in Surrey. I urge the Minister to put Surrey County Council's Children's Services in special measures. I know that Surrey County Council is going to be abolished, and pleased they are, but children's lives are at risk now. We cannot wait for local government reorganisation. Surrey's failures must have consequences for them, not for my vulnerable constituents. It must have consequences for their leadership. From April next year, my area is going to have a new local authority, West Surrey Council. I don't want Surrey County Council's record of mismanagement and poor culture of serving the public transferred to the new local authority. That is why I urge the Minister to intervene to protect vulnerable children like Sarah in Woking and across Surrey. Thank you.
I remind members that they should bob if they wish to be called in the debate. Clearly there are quite a few. So on the basis of what I've seen, if I could ask members to speak for around 4 to 5 minutes, it's an informal application, and we'll see how we get on. The question is that this House has considered children's services in local authorities. Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Mr Weston, for chairing the debate this morning, and may I pay tribute to the member for Woking for the way that he's represented his constituents so well this morning in this debate, and particularly my condolences to Zara's family in the horror story which he shared. Colleagues may have heard York's story, and for those that haven't, are just about to hear the story. And the Honourable Member was right to say that York moved from a position of requires improvement to outstanding in one go. And I have to point out to the Minister we're the lowest funded per capita local authority after the Fair Funding Review, which doesn't seem fair at all because we're certainly not the most affluent place by far in the country. The catalyst for the change in York comes down to two people, Martin Kelly, the Director of Children's Services, and his Deputy, Danielle Johnson. And I want to pay tribute to them, but also say to all honourable members, if you want to learn about York's journey and the outstanding achievements that it's occurred, they're open to have dialogue with yourselves as well. At the heart of change was a new practice model put in place, a committed workforce where we move from 45 agency staff to 0, and on the basis that if you weren't committed to the service and the children, then you had no place in the authority. And a pioneering approach which puts children at the heart, built on co-production, innovates for change, brings evidence to its practice, and even through its reform has managed to cut costs further down by £7 million. Through coordination across services, they have built stability and made a difference to every child. We are desperate to do more, to reshape services, drive change and press ahead with transformations. The model moves from transactional to relational, risk avoidance to risk management, safe certainty to safe uncertainty. This is just about being honest about risk, and short-term interventions to long-term outcomes. Every decision has the child at its centres and considers the long-term implications of each decision, developing resilience all the time. It's a strength-based approach, seeks out every opportunity for the child, and is summed up with the strapline, our children belong in York, connected to the people they love and supported by the network around them. But the journey doesn't end there. A child or young person needs their holistic needs met in one place. So here are my asks of the Minister. Mental health services must be integrated around a child, not separated in the CAM services, which is failing all of our young people. We have a SEND hub in the city where all children can gather, and parents and professionals in an integrated way. But again, we need CAMS as part of the conversation. This will remove the need for a diagnosis because a label doesn't describe the child in multi-complex spectrums, but instead must be fully integrated to put the support around a child's needs. We need to start young. So I urge the Minister to really put the investment into the 1001 critical days. We know, for instance, with FASD, we need, at the very start of life, to ensure that we've got the right interventions around the parents. And if we can get the parenting right through the first 9 months through pregnancy, then we have a stronger opportunity to prevent care orders in the future and ensure that there is appropriate antenatal care as well as comprehensive support from the family. We need funding as well in York. I mentioned how low our funding is, but we have got 8 areas in the lowest quintile of deprivation in our city. And everyone, including ministers, always talk about what a beautiful city and about Vikings and walls and the Minster. But it doesn't make a child safer. In fact, many of these children have never seen those assets, and many of those children are struggling because we simply don't have the resources we need. We've just come in as in the lowest 25th of schools and 23rd lowest for higher needs funding. Our city does need more funding because a child in York is worth as much as a child in Camden, and yet we have about a third of the funding to do things. But also much more than that, we want to be able to push our model further, provide more services for parents, and ensure that we can keep the family together, which is our objective, as we seriously reduce the number of children who are in social care. And we also want to drive our model of good practice further so that we can draw on that world's best practice and bring it into York, particularly in those early years, those preschool years, supporting parents on their journey as well, and working with a child's developmental pathway, not against it. And therefore, we need to ensure that we've got the right pedagogies in place. And I was disappointed earlier in the week in the debate around play in education. We really need to understand the way that the mind develops to work with children. But I also plead with the Minister that we look through a prism of poverty as well. We have significant areas of poverty in York, and yet if we put the right investment in, we know that we can make a difference for our children. So we're ambitious in York, and I'm proud to showcase all that we've done, but we're desperate to want to go further. We know we can do it. We've always in York been a laboratory of social change. A pioneering spirit is built within all of us, and therefore I urge government to work with us to be able to deliver more of government's objectives, but also our own for our children.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Weston. It's an honour to serve with you in the chair. As of March 2025, nearly 9 in 10 London councils were rated good or outstanding for children's services. But by contrast, in the southwest of England, it's barely half that. Children's services in Devon have faced serious challenges over recent years. And in May 2025, Ofsted's full inspection of Devon County Council's children's services judged the service to be inadequate overall. And that means too many children experiencing neglect or abuse did not receive timely or effective help, too many plans drifted, and too many care leavers did not get consistent support. I pay tribute to my honourable friend, the honourable member for Woking, and I agree with almost all of what he said. I think, for me, I want to make plain that I would not criticise the people working in children's services because I feel like individual social workers are a bit like goalkeepers. All too often, rather than praising their work for the children that they save, we condemn, we lambast the individuals who have cases where things go wrong. And yes, there is failure, and yes, there are real errors of judgment at the local authority level. But my sense is that the fault and the blame, and indeed the sin that he points to, lies with the perpetrators. Devon's position is serious, but it is not static. In formal correspondence to Devon County Council in December 2025, the Minister for Children and Families set out the government's position on the progress being made in improving children's services in Devon. And he explicitly notes this improving picture and says that there is increasing evidence of improvement to social work practice, linked to stronger prioritisation and support from corporate and political leadership. He also points to Ofsted's recent monitoring work, which recognised that the range and impact of support provided to care leavers in Devon has improved since the last inspection. And I appreciate that he does this from a place of caring very deeply for children's services, not just as a political leader, but as someone who has been a leader in this sector for well over a decade. Workforce instability in children's services in Devon, particularly the high use of agency staff, has held the service back. Reports in 2023 showed that around 50% of children's social work posts were filled by agency staff, compared with a national average of about 18%. And in Devon, a permanent children's social worker costs roughly £23 per hour, while agency staff cost about £44 per hour. So closing that gap and reducing the reliance on agency staff is clearly urgent. Devon has taken measurable steps in the last year to build stability in children's services and reduce reliance on agency staff. According to Devon County Council's latest People First strategy, the number of agency team managers has been cut by about 40% from 20 to 12 as of last April, improving leadership within frontline teams. Devon's assessed and supported year in employment programme for newly qualified social workers, and the County Council Social Care Academy continue to recruit and support newly qualified social workers, with roles actively advertised throughout 2025 and tailored development pathways to encourage permanent careers in the county, rather than the short-term contracts that we've seen before. I want to now talk to the issue of residential care. The latest national...
On that point, will my honourable friend give way?
Yes, I will.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. Somerset Council tells me that providers of residential homes for children in care can charge as much as £8,000 to £15,000 per week for one child, because they know that the council will have no other choice. With Somerset Council is making good progress on its non-profit Home of Horizons partnership. Does the honourable member agree council need more support to disrupt the market that provides these residential homes to tackle profiteering companies?
The honourable member for Yeovil is absolutely right about this, and the situation is similar, where in Devon it's reckoned that these profiteering companies are making a complete packet. The Local Government Association analysis suggests that 20 of the largest independent children's social care providers in England took in about £1.63 billion in fees in 2021-22, and roughly 19% of that, about £310 million, was recorded as profit. Plainly, there is too much money leaving this sector and not doing the right thing for children. So to close, Chair, Devon's children's services are improving, and Devon's children deserve services that are not just improving, but that are consistently good and moving towards outstanding. Thank you.
Because of the number of members who have indicated their wish to speak, and the 4 to 5 minutes was not perhaps kept to quite as tightly as I would have hoped. So we're going to have to go, I think, straight to a formal 4 minutes for speeches. Gareth Snell.
Thank you very much, Mr Weston. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And can I also commend the Honourable Member for Woking for the compassionate way in which he made his speech and the dignity with which he brought to Zara's memory. I think when you have those sort of horrific cases that you have to retell in this place, it can go one of two ways. I think he did the young woman justice today. Mr Weston, Stoke-on-Trent City Council is often at the top of league tables you wish to be at the bottom of, and at the bottom of league tables you wish to be at the top of. That is a structural failing that we've had for many, many years, and our children's services is no different. Although it was rated inadequate in 2019, it's now in a requires improvement to be good situation. That's partly because of the leadership that has been shown since the 2013 local elections. But we are one of, normally it's us and Hartlepool are sort of number one in terms of the number of children who are in care as an absolute number, but also as a per capita to 100,000. It is a financial drain on our council, which I know the Minister has been made aware of, not least because I've told him. This year, £1 in £3 of the council spends will be spent on children's services. 1,086 children in care. It is just a phenomenally large number compared to our statistical neighbours. It is an anomaly for which we cannot get to the bottom of, and at this point I want to commend the work of our Chief Executive at the Council, John Rouse, who has worked nationally on these issues and has deployed as many techniques as we can muster to order to get that number down, but it has remained stubbornly high. It fluctuates as around the 1,000 number, but it just means that we are spending millions of pounds on children in care at a time when money is tight. The government has helped since 2023-24 budget. The City Council has received cumulatively, and if the government signs off this year's request, around £70 million of exceptional financial support in order to balance the budget to deal with the overspend, driven exclusively by the demand in children's services. And there is no, we can't work out why we would have as many young people being put into the care system as we do. You know, we are a city that does have poverty. Lots of places have poverty. We're a city where social capital is not high. But we're not that dissimilar to our statistical neighbours, and yet our numbers are significant and not coming down at the rate that we would want. The Minister, I know, is not immune to the challenges that places like Stoke face. He will know that there have been complex issues around small local authorities in densely populated urban areas where there are underlying socio-economic factors. But that shouldn't be a reason to accept these high numbers, because it's bad for the city, but it's also bad for those young people who and we all know that care experienced young people tend to have lower social capital, lower opportunities, and their life chances ahead of them are disproportionately impacted by the fact they're going into care. So we do need to work out a solution to this. So my ask to the Minister today, which is something I've raised with him privately, but I want to put on the record today, is can we look at a rigorous partnership working board for Stoke-on-Trent, one that brings together government, local authorities and the expertise that we've heard from some other speakers today to try and get to the root cause of the problem that we have in Stoke-on-Trent. And I will be taking up the offer from my honourable friend from York to speak to her officials about how they've done their remarkable progress, because if we can learn from that, we absolutely will. Would the government be willing to look at a rigorous, potentially academic-led investigation as to what that driver is of social care need in Stoke-on-Trent so that we can get to that cause as well as solution? And can we talk about Ofsted? Because the City Council was doing remarkably well. Then the Ofsted judgment came in and said that we were managing too much risk. So we instantly had to go back to a risk-averse situation, which has driven those numbers up. So, Mr Weston, with those three asks, I thank you for your time and attention today.
So, Franklin.
Pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. I'm very grateful to my honourary friend, the member for Woking, for securing this important debate, and he's made a very powerful speech on behalf of his vulnerable constituents as well as vulnerable people across the county of Surrey and beyond. The central failing I want to highlight today is this. Surrey County Council, my constituency's local authority for children's services, repeatedly choosing not to use its statutory powers even when children are unsafe, out of education or legally entitled to support, and children and families across Guildford are feeling the consequences. Schools are often the first to spot safeguarding concerns. Head teachers and designated safeguarding leads do not raise alarms lightly. They do so because they are often the only professionals with consistent daily insight into a child's well-being. At a meeting last year, a head teacher told us that safeguarding thresholds in Surrey are far higher than comparable authorities. Referrals stall and the council is reluctant to move from voluntary support to formal safeguarding processes. And this is often justified by the family resilience model. And of course, there's nothing wrong with a strengths-based approach, but the issue is how it is applied. One head teacher at this same meeting described with visible emotion a child in her school who was showing clear signs of neglect and abuse. The head teacher followed safeguarding procedures and referred the case to Surrey. And instead of investigating, the council informed the parents that a safeguarding concern had been raised, and the parents removed the child from school. That head teacher told us she lies awake at night, not knowing where that child is or whether they are safe. And this is not an isolated incident. And of course, my honourable friend has referred to the tragic case of Sarah Sharif, and that is absolutely the most tragic example in Surrey. And these safeguarding failures are deeply linked to failures in education. Just one example from my constituents, we have a looked after child approaching a critical educational transition, but approval for an appropriate placement was delayed because that child is in temporary accommodation outside Surrey due to a shortage of placements. Despite Surrey being the corporate parent, geography is treated as a barrier rather than the system adapting. And there are so many other examples I could share. I have several questions that I wish to ask the Minister, but given time, I will write to him to ask them, and simply want to ask today whether he will commit to reviewing whether Surrey is meeting its statutory safeguarding educational duties, particularly in relation to thresholds for intervention. Children in Surrey need a system that acts without hesitation when their safety, welfare or education is at risk. And I urge the government to do all it can to ensure Surrey County Council meets its legal responsibilities, and I fully support my colleague, the Honourable Member for Woking, and his call for the government to intervene in Surrey in order to keep children safe.
John Whitby.
Mr Weston, it's a pleasure to serve under your chairship today, and I'd like to thank the member for Woking, who's made a very powerful speech this morning. As a foster carer and a member of an adoption panel and a former lead member of a local authority, Tier 1 authority, I've seen the damage firsthand that austerity has caused to local authorities across the country, and in particular to children's services. The lack of resource and support has contributed to the number of children in care rocketing, which in turn has created a placement sufficiency crisis in children's social care, which has meant that the number of children in residential care has more than doubled between 2010 and 2024. And of course, that's presented extra pressures on authorities, as children would have to be routinely placed at a distance from their local area. And every day that the previous government were in power, an average of 140 children, equivalent of nearly 5 classrooms full, entered poverty. But we now have a Minister for Children and Families who understands the problems we face, as it was him that delivered the independent review of children's social care. So I'm going to focus on some of the changes Labour's made to improve children's services thus far. Firstly, there is the continued rollout of the Mockingbird programme. Mockingbird brings new foster carers together with those who are more experienced, helping create an extended family-like community around foster carers, foster families. who can provide advice, expertise and support. And a few weeks ago I spoke to a group of foster carers about their experiences, and many told me that, about the positive impact that Mockingbird's scheme had had on them, and therefore welcome the additional 40 million the government's investing in children's social care, which is helping to ensure that programmes like Mockingbird continue to be rolled out across the country. If we can't attract enough new foster carers, and that's always a challenge, then we need to keep hold of and support the ones we have. And secondly, the government is bringing in important changes within the Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill that will protect local authorities from paying exorbitant fees to large private-run children's home providers. And as I said previously, there are many more children living in residential care due to the placement sufficiency crisis. And as already been mentioned this morning, in 2022, the largest 20 providers of children's residential placements collectively made £310 million in profit, and that was all off the back of the public purse. It's therefore welcome that as a result of the Children's Wellbeing Schools Bill, large children's placement providers will have to give regular financial information to a newly created financial oversight scheme, and I'm glad that the bill will give the government the power, if necessary, to cap the profits of private children's home providers. And there are many other positive changes to highlight, including changes ensuring that there is greater oversight on homeschooling for children subject to a child protection order. The rollout of the Stay in Close programme, which will give care leavers from residential care, of course, as I've already said, the numbers have grown significantly. It will give them extra support to stay in homes, to get education, to get work. And there are new requirements that will ensure that all local authorities offer family group decision making, a move that will keep more children out of care altogether, which in turn will save authorities money. And we are, of course, opening new Best Start family hubs in all English local authorities. And that's the thing we've really missed. Taken together, the changes will alleviate pressures on local authority children's services, give our children greater protection, and give greater support to those who are carers. It will, of course, take time for many of these changes to be felt, but having been on the front lines of children's social care for more than 2 decades, I know that these changes will make a real and tangible difference to our most vulnerable and at-risk children. Thank you.
Iqbal Mohammed.
Thank you, Mr. Weston. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship, and I would like to thank my honourable friend, the member for Woking, for securing this important debate and for his passionate and heartfelt speech. I just want to begin by acknowledging that Kirklees Council has improved significantly since previous inspections, with the most recent inspection in 2024 judging it as good overall for children's services, and it is allocated extra funding in 2026 to 27 to try and address some of the findings. But the message to government is that the councils who have done all they can to get from needing improvement to good, they need that extra support in funding and resources to then go and push further to get to outstanding. In my speech today, I just want to focus on one area that might not be raised. So we've heard that the pressures on local authorities are absolutely intense, and they are growing. In Dewsbury and Batley, around 300 children are being raised in kinship care, that is, cared for by grandparents, aunts, uncles or close friends who step in during moments of crisis. Alongside this, over 100 children are currently in local authority care in Kirklees. Importantly, in Kirklees, we have lower numbers of looked-after children than many of our neighbourhood councils, reflecting long-standing preventative approaches and sustained investment in early help and family support. We also have a higher proportion of children able to remain with their extended families, including a greater use of special guardianship orders, which we know significantly improve outcomes for children. Kinship carers in particular provide a vital service in offering continuity, familiarity and love at a time of upheaval, yet too often they do so with insufficient support. Across Yorkshire and Humber, almost half of kinship carers rate the support they receive from local authorities as poor or very poor. Alarmingly, 12% say they may not be able to continue caring for their kinship children in the next year if circumstances do not improve. This will put almost 2,000 children at risk of entering formal care in Yorkshire and Humber. That is not both a human tragedy and a financial one. Evidence shows that for every 100 children supported in well-resourced kinship care rather than local authority care, the state saves £4 million a year and improves long-term outcomes for those children. Nationally, children's social care reforms are widely welcomed and have been shaped by expertise of the Association of Directors of Children's Services. The renewed focus on multi-agency family support, early intervention and prevention is particularly welcome. The proposed investment through the Families First Partnership Programme and wider reforms has the potential to make a real difference. Strengthening our ability to help families stay together where safe, deploy evidence-based interventions and deliver high-quality social care. But reform must be matched with sustained funding and genuine cross-government coordination and alongside real sustained support on the ground. That means investing in early intervention, strengthening kinship care support, improving placement sufficiency and ensuring joined-up working across services. Just my final point to the Minister. In the first year of becoming an MP, I raised the issue of automatic off-rolling of children after 20 days of absence without authorisation. That really needs to be looked at so that there is a formal meeting and a review of why that child was out before just off-rolling them, because this can impact create safeguarding issues. Thank you.
Luke Meyer.
It's a pleasure to serve with you in the chair, and I congratulate the Honourable Member for Woking for securing this debate and telling Zara's story so powerfully and allowing us this space to discuss one of the most important public services that we have. I first want to pay tribute to everyone who works in children's services all across our country, but particularly in my two local authorities of Middlesbrough and Redcombe-Cleveland. And I was privileged before entering this place to be Cabinet Member for Children in Redcombe-Cleveland, and I was impressed every single day by the extraordinary staff working in that department under immense pressure, as has been discussed today. I often used to say that the toddlers who lost early intervention services in the first wave of austerity were now teenagers coming into care with complex challenges. And I think we're still seeing that challenge today. I just want to take this opportunity to highlight the most recent Ofsted inspection in Redcombe-Cleveland, which was published just this morning. In 2022, the department was rated as requires improvement across all areas, and it was a top priority for the Labour Council, which came in 2023, to turn that around. I was very proud of the recognition from Ofsted in 2023 of the work we were doing on that front, and today I'm very pleased to see that Ofsted have now rated Redcombe-Cleveland as good, with strong practice and swift support for children and families. That's a big step forward. It's a real credit to all of the staff, to the directors, previously Catherine Bolton and her successor Danielle Swainston, and the Cabinet Member responsible, Councillor Bill Suthers, whose leadership has been steady and cooperative, and he deserves recognition for that. It's obviously not the end of the journey, but it's a very important milestone to make sure that we are serving the children that all of us have a duty towards. And it's especially welcome given the challenging context that they face, which we have discussed today. The Institute for Government recently found that nearly every local authority is overspending on children's social care, largely because private care providers have become much more expensive for placements. It's been described by the CMA as a broken market, and it needs addressing. We see private providers extracting high margins while councils raid reserves and increase council tax disproportionately in areas of high deprivation just to keep children safe. My honourable friend mentioned Hartlepool. In fact, across the Tees Valley, we've got a cluster of local authorities with extraordinary pressure in this area. And no one in this room thinks that that is a sensible way to run such an important public service. There are answers, and I welcome the new grant funding coming forward and the Best Start Family Hubs and the Families First Partnership Programme. I think there are really important changes coming forward from the government. But I do think there is more that we can do to disrupt this broken market, and the Children's Wellbeing Bill has given the department powers to act. We can cap these profits in private providers, and we can set up regional care cooperatives as recommended by the McAllister Review, the author of which I know the Minister is very well acquainted with. which can improve commissioning and increase in-house and not-for-profit provision. And in the Tees Valley Council, leaders are exploring that idea together so we can stop competing with each other and pool our buying power and shape a more stable local market to get better value for children and for taxpayers as well. I'm really convinced that this is a necessary step in our region, and it sits alongside work on prevention and family help and a more stable workforce as well. So I really hope that we can look at this, and with the right national framework and the right investment and the confidence to try new models, we can build a children's social care system that is stable and compassionate and worthy of the young people that it serves. Thank you.
Morello.
Thank you, Mr. Weston, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairship for what I think is the third time in 3 days. So I'm feeling very blessed. I'd like to congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Woking, for securing this important debate, for his incredibly moving speech and for all of his hard work and advocacy in this area. Woking is extremely lucky to have somebody fighting for their corner, as he does. Too many families in rural areas face a system that they feel is too distant, fragmented and increasingly under strain. Local authorities' budgets are under immense pressure, particularly in rural areas where delivering support is inherently more expensive. Delivering children's services in rural areas costs more, sustainable buildings are harder to find, connectivity is weaker, long travel distances make everything from early intervention to crisis support more complex and more expensive. Funding formulas rarely account for these challenges. Pre-child expenditure varies hugely between authorities, with some spending 3.5 times more per child than in other areas. I welcome the government's commitment to invest £500 million to rebuild the family services under the Best Start umbrella and the creation of Best Start family hubs. But children in rural constituencies like West Dorset need safe, accessible family spaces for children's services to take place. Local authorities should be empowered to retrofit vacant buildings such as Station Master's House at Sherborne Station into family hubs that meet local needs, rather than centralised services that can be miles away. I also welcome the extension of the Adoption and Special Guardianship Support Fund into 26-27. But short-term extensions are not enough. Children with complex needs cannot thrive without certainty of long-term therapeutic support. The Cora project, a local charity providing vital support in Dorset, warns that without long-term funding, children cannot receive the care they need. They've shared heartbreaking cases. A young girl in her 4th care placement relies on her therapist as her only stable relationship, and another child with severe additional needs sees therapy as her only safe space. Professionals agree that in complex cases, long-term government support is vital. One constituent, Brenda, is a blind adopter raising a teenager with FASD, ADHD and developmental trauma. Specialist therapy funded through the scheme has helped her daughter regulate her emotions and engage with her EHCP. Kate and Dave, caring for 2 children with overlapping needs, face constant anxiety because assessments can be funded, but not the ongoing therapy that professionals say is essential. Local authorities must have stable, predictable funding and proper support and guidance from central government to meet these challenges. It means recognising rurality in funding formula, ending short-term fixes and ensuring that access to services does not depend on a postcode. Children in West Dorset and in rural communities across the country deserve services that are stable, accessible and fair. Thank you.
David Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Weston. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. For obvious reasons, we often hear in this House about failure, notably that raised by the Honourable Member for Woking today, that tragic case, and I congratulate him for securing this important debate. I'd like to focus on a local authority that's been able to turn its children's services around. In 2017, a BBC report warned that children in Powys were being put at risk because of serious failings in the council's children's services. Inspectors found missed safeguarding opportunities, weak oversight and poor follow-up. Concerns so serious that Welsh Government intervention was actively being discussed. Now that history matters because it gives context to the progress that is now being made. Since 2022, under Liberal Democrat leadership at Powys County Council, there's been a focus on rebuilding children's services from the ground up, strengthening leadership, supporting the workforce and putting children's safety back at the centre of decision-making. That work is now being recognised independently. A recent external assurance review concluded that Paris Children's Services are safe and improving, with no serious failings identified. The reviewer specifically highlighted stable leadership, strong advocacy for children through independent reviewing officers, and high-quality performance reporting, precisely those areas that were found wanting in 2017. Staff report feeling supported and proud to work in the service, and Paris social workers and safeguarding professionals have been recognised at regional awards for their work protecting children and involving young people directly in shaping services. No one is pretending that that job is finished. Pressures remain, particularly around funding and placements, but the direction of travel is clear and very welcome. Powys has moved from a service once described as putting children at risk to one independently judged to be safe and improving. That is what sustained leadership looks like, and it's a positive example that this House should be willing to recognise. Clearly, the overlying point here is that vulnerable children need a strong state to look after them. Functioning children's services to keep them safe are essential. And that's why I hold the Conservatives and Reform in complete contempt, because they do not believe in our state. They've spent the last 40 years bashing the state, cutting the state. They attack it over and over again, spreading their cynical poison that a small state is desirable. Well, a small state ends up endangering our nation's children. It's essential that these services are funded properly and well to keep our children safe. And that's why I'm proud to be a Liberal Democrat, and I'm proud of what Powys County Council have been able to achieve over the past few years.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A real pleasure to serve on your chairship as always, and a big thank you to the Honourable Member for Woking for setting the scene incredibly well. When our children's services are so important, his introduction and the story that he tells has been well illustrated in the paper, and it's almost inconceivable to understand how that young child went through that brutality, that violence, and indeed it moved us all, and I thank him for sharing it with this chamber and setting that scene, which is very important for what the Honourable Gentleman is trying to achieve and what we need to achieve as well. The thing is, it could have been prevented. And that's the issue that the Honourable Gentleman has referred to, which is why it's incredibly important, Mr. Chairman. Local children's services are essential to support, protect and improve the well-being of children, young people and families before any minor or moderate problems escalate into crisis situations. The early help approach has important benefits for parents and the community. I always try to give, Mr. Chairman, an Northern Ireland perspective to this debate, ever mindful that the Minister doesn't have responsibility for Northern Ireland, but I'd like to add the comments, if I can, please, for that maybe would illustrate the problems that we're having, but some of the things that we're doing which are helpful, and I'll try to be on the positive side in relation to those things. Within Northern Ireland, and especially in my constituency of Strangford, numerous services which go above and beyond at all different levels to serve children. We have the Ards Arena Youth Resource Centre, provides activities for confidence building, for peer interaction and safe community engagement. There's also the multi-agency support through the CYPSP, bringing together statutory, voluntary and community organisations to improve outcomes for children and families. Not to mention Newton Ards Child Social Services team that are based in James Street in Newton Ards town centre, in the major town of the constituency. I know many of those staff personally and who work there, and the contribution that they make to the lives of young people does not go unnoticed. And I think the Honourable gentleman for Tunnington, I think it is, referred to the staff and what they do. And I think it's important we remember there are many staff that make fantastic contributions, and the focus must be on the perpetrators, as he rightly said, to ensure that the issues are addressed. As of the 31st of March 2025, 22,243 children were known to social services as a child in need. So what do they mean by a child in need? It means a child who is assessed as requiring services to achieve or maintain a reasonable standard of health or development, or to prevent significant impairment. The pressure in local children's services is intense, and the support can range from marital breakups to missing children, to children with deteriorating mental health, or even children who've had to be removed from family homes. Some of those are desperate cases, and they certainly would worry us. Protecting the well-being before crisis stage is critical. Ensuring that necessary support is there is also critical to ensuring that young people feel safe before they reach a point of requiring emergency service. We must strengthen families, Mr Chairman, provide the services possible to keep young people's lives stable. Research has suggested that preventative services like community youth centres and support programmes improve health, education and social outcomes. So let's do our bit to ensure that these services are sustainable and are fit for purpose. To conclude, local support in terms of children's services plays a proactive role in ensuring children in my constituency and across the whole of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland can thrive. Modern society and social issues can be hard enough for young people to navigate, and the pressures for our young children and families is incredible. It's all about ensuring support they need. I want to do that. Honourable members and right honourable members also want to do that. I know the Minister wants to do that as well. It's very important to ensure that. So I look to the Minister for his commitment to children's services across the United Kingdom, and maybe some discussions that the Minister has had or could have with the Northern Ireland Assembly to see how we can do things better together. Thank you.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson, Munira Wilson.
Thank you very much, Mr Weston. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship this morning. Can I thank my honourable friend, the member for Woking, for securing this important debate and for his tireless dedication to ensuring what happened to Zara Sharif never ever happens to another child again. We've heard a range of contributions today, and I just want to start by saying, obviously, children's services in local authorities across the country play a vital and a statutory role in ensuring that all children, including the most vulnerable, receive the support and education that every child deserves and needs. And I want to echo the comments of the honourable member for Middlesbrough South and East Cleveland in paying tribute to those working on the front line, as my honourable friend for Honiton and Sidmouth also did. They are often overworked, underpaid and underthanked, and deserving of our thanks, notwithstanding systemic and structural failures. Yet, as many honourable members have commented on, many local authorities face deep funding challenges, and for some of those local authorities that will be further exacerbated by what has been called the Fair Funding Review. And I fear that we'll see short-term decisions that will ultimately cost the taxpayer more in the long run. And I've always argued, and Liberal Democrats have always argued, that we should see spending on and supporting our children as an investment in our future, our society's future, our economy's future. And I will return to funding a bit later on, but I wanted to start where my honourable friend, the member for Woking, started, because I listened to his powerful and opening words about Zara's story with tears in my eyes. And I was reminded as I listened to him that I felt similarly in May 2022 in the main chamber when the then Education Secretary, one Nadeem Zahawi, gave a statement following the brutal deaths of Star Hobson and Arthur Labigneux Hughes. And then, as is always the case after these horrendous stories, we say never again, and he promised lessons would be learned. And indeed, the Children's Commissioner, when she was giving evidence to the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill Committee last year, said every time a child dies, we give exactly the same set of recommendations, including better multi-agency working and better join-up. Yet time and again, Victoria Colombier, Arthur Labigneux Hughes, Sarah Sharif, we find ourselves saying the same things. The government must take action. And I welcome the fact that actually this government is taking a number of steps in the right direction, and I'm very happy to acknowledge that. Last year, I and the Right Honourable Member for Kingston and Surbiton, he and I met Professor Alexis Jay together about the findings of her review into child sexual abuse. And when we talked to her about her inquiry, she impressed upon me 2 points: the importance of a child protection authority and the importance of data sharing. And I'm grateful that the Minister has now announced a Child Protection Authority. I hope he might be able to set out a bit more about the timelines and implementation. And on data sharing, which was so critical in Zara's case, I welcome some of the measures in the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill, not least the introduction of a single unique identifier, which we in the Liberal Democrats strongly support. We believe that proper data sharing between services will help children be better safeguarded. And I hope that government will continue to address some of the concerns that have been raised around privacy and data sharing, given government's record at times of data loss and being hacked. Because I do fear, and I raised this with the Home Secretary a few weeks ago, there are people outside of this place who are scaremongering and suggesting this is digital ID for children, when actually this is about how we safeguard children and provide better services and commission better services and indeed research to support our children. The other thing in the bill that's currently in the other place is the Children Not in School register. As my honourable friend, the member for Woking, has said, this is something that we, the Liberal Democrats, have long supported, so that vulnerable children don't disappear from the system. However, we have repeatedly set out through the passage of the bill that we do have concerns about the amount of information that is set out in the face of the bill that has to be collected in terms of that register, not just in terms of the impact and the intrusion on families, but actually even the Association of Directors of Children's Services in oral evidence to the Bill Committee was circumspect about the amount of detailed information that home educating parents will be expected to supply. And certainly talking to councillors and local government officials, they are worried about the huge burden this is going to put on local authorities in terms of meeting their new duties if the government won't amend that part of the bill. And if they're going to put these duties on them, then the funding needs to follow so that they're properly resourced to actually be able to collect the data and implement it. And that brings me back to the point of funding, because as we've heard, underfunding is a consistent theme in children's services. I talked about children being an investment, but unfortunately, the politics is such, governments think in electoral cycles, and the return on investment in investing in a young child is often not seen for 15, 20 years, and it is very hard to make the case to the Treasury. And for that, the Minister has my sympathy and my support. But to quote his own independent review at him, he said in his review, what we have currently is a system increasingly skewed to crisis intervention with outcomes for children that continue to be unacceptably poor and costs that continue to rise. And so I recognise that last year the government announced a children's social care prevention grant, but I'm afraid that money pales into insignificance when you hear, as you've heard so starkly today from my honourable friends, many of whom represent rural constituencies where they are seeing very, very deep funding cuts through the fair funding reallocation of local government funding, where the most vulnerable are going to lose out. And it's not just rural areas. Those of us in London constituencies too, and I know there are many honourable colleagues on the benches opposite who often say to me, oh, well, you represent an affluent area. Yes, on the whole I do. That doesn't mean that deprivation and need and vulnerable children don't exist. And the fact that my local authority in Richmond, I think is one of the worst hit in the country, is going to lose about £47 million of government funding over the next 4 years means it is those vulnerable children that will miss out. So yes, these pots of funding the government's making available for children's services are welcome, but offset against the losses means that we are going to see children suffer. And it's a real shame that we're seeing this money taken away in London, because actually between 2010 and 2023, London Borough saw an 11% reduction in the number of children looked after, while England as a whole experienced a 30% increase. And so the changes to the Children and Young People's Formula in London specifically, I think risk undoing some very good work that we've seen London boroughs do and to give our children the best start in life. Now, obviously, I will always argue for more money to be spent in children's services, but I also recognise that there isn't a magic money tree and we face a difficult fiscal situation, not least as a result of the previous Conservative government. So there are ways that I think savings can be made. Early intervention is one of them, and I know the Minister is very supportive of that approach. And there are a number of measures in the Children's Wellbeing Bill, like family group decision making and so on, which are really great measures that are being brought forward. I would ask him to also look at some of the amendments in the other place from my friend, the Noble Baroness Tyler, who is looking at ensuring that local authorities have a duty to support parents after a child is taken away from them, so that not only do they overcome the trauma and grief, but also make a lasting change, because actually all the data shows that half of newborns in care proceedings are born to mothers who've already been through proceedings with another child. So we need to take action early to prevent the same thing happening again. A number of honourable colleagues in both Labour and Liberal Democrat benches have talked about the eye-watering costs of private social care providers and fostering agencies that are bleeding local authorities dry. I welcome the measures in the bill that put a backstop in place for the government to put a profit cap on children's social care. I urge him again, as I have done again and again and again, please extend that profit cap to to private special schools, which are also bleeding our local authorities dry. When one school charges over $100,000 a year in fees plus transport, whilst state-maintained alternatives do it for £25,000 for the same cohort, that is an obvious place the government can save money. And the answer is, as I know the government's already started on, but I think it needs to go further, is capital investment in state-run specialist provision in the same way that it is in state-run children's care homes. I give way.
Just making a wonderful point, it reminds me of a conversation I had fairly recently with my council, where a group of parents who had 10 or 15 parents who had autistic children, but who definitely did not need to be in specialist schools, needed a local provision. The council, because of the different pots of money, it was easier for the council to pay a private provider £100,000 for them to have to travel 20, 30 miles, because they couldn't afford the capital cost of 1.5 million to set up a local school. They wanted to do that, but they didn't have that money, which is disadvantaging parents who now have kids travelling vast distances.
Yeah, it's a familiar story, and I completely agree with him. I'm being given indication from the chair that I'm already overrunning, so I will try and cut short my last points. The Minister is aware that I've long campaigned on kinship care. Again, the bill takes welcome steps forward, but there's much further to go, because he knows in the short term putting a child with a family member is not just better for their long-term outcomes, it will save local authorities about 50% of the costs it would be putting them in care, even if they gave them allowances on a par with foster carers. That has got to be an urgent intervention which is cost-saving, and he needs to restore the Adoption and Special Guardianship Support Fund grants, as we've heard so clearly from my honourable friend from West Dorset about the long-term impact. So can I conclude with the Minister's own words at him from his review? How we care for our children is nothing short of a reflection of our values as a country. I think we've heard today we are falling short on that. We stand ready to work cross-party to make sure that his vision becomes a reality. Thank you.
Opposition spokesperson Jack Rankin.
Thank you, Mr Weston. It is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. I thank the honourable member for Woking for securing this important debate and for his powerful and thoughtful contribution, particularly in relation to the tragic case of Sarah Sharif. We've heard thoughtful contributions from right across this House this morning, Mr Weston. The member for York Central was passionate about her city, about sharing best practice and the importance of the first 1,001 critical days of a child's life. The member for Honiton and Sidmouth talked about the variation in children's services around the country and how it's a postcode lottery, and particularly the difference between London and the South West. It's heartening to hear that services in his constituency of Devon are improving. There has been calls from joined-up thinking from right across the House, particularly led by the member for Stoke-on-Trent Central, and the member for Guildford supported the honourable member for Woking, raising concerns on behalf of her constituents re the quality of care from Surrey County Council. I was particularly moved by the members for Derbyshire Dale's personal commitment to look after children, and he brought his personal experience to bear in the debate here today. Themes we've heard from right across the House: the support for kinship carers, the need for long-term funding, the lack of places that we see, and the way that we need processes in order to learn the vital lessons of the past. I think I would like to associate His Majesty's loyal opposition with, but particularly the tributes we've heard from members to frontline staff. There may be systematic issues, but we know frontline staff do their best in difficult constraints. They are overworked and underpaid and deserve all of our support. I think it is shocking, Mr Weston, the nature of need in the country. Local authorities in England are supporting around 400,000 children in need. That's roughly 1 in 30 children as of the end of March last year. Around 49,000 children were subject to child protection plans and more than 80,000 were in local authority care. Those figures should give us pause to cause. 1 in 30 children, the equivalent of a child in every classroom. But this debate is not about numbers, it's about children, the most vulnerable, at-risk children in our communities. Not statistics, but lives. And in the case of Sarah Sharif, a life lost. Sarah was living in Woking when she was murdered by her father and stepmother, and the Honourable Member for Woking has rightly been a passionate advocate for change, particularly since the publication of the local child safeguarding practice review. I commend him for that work. 9 of the 15 recommendations in that review were wholly or partially local, and I echo the call for Surrey County Council to implement them swiftly but thoroughly. It is our responsibility in this place to ensure that where national recommendations are made, children's services are properly equipped to meet their statutory duties. I welcome the work that has begun, but there is more to do. Turning to the national picture, the scale of pressures on children's services is clear. According to the Local Government Association, the number of children in care is 18% higher than a decade ago. Councils now carry out more than 600 child protection investigations every single day. But despite increased budgeted spending, councils have been overspending on children's social care by an average of 14% each year, and planned budgets for 2025-26 show a further 10% rise in costs. At the heart of this lies a fundamental problem: a shortage of high-quality placements for looked-after children. Demand continues to outstrip supply, driving up costs and putting intense pressure on social care, SEND services and care leaver support alike. Under the previous Conservative government, the proportion of local authorities' children's services rated good or outstanding rose from 24% in 2015 to 60% in 2024, according to the Institute for Government. That progress matters, but it's equally true that around a third of local authorities still require improvement or are judged inadequate. This is about children's safety, and having listened to members from across the political spectrum, I hope I speak for many in saying that we all want the government to succeed in this area. Getting children's services right underpins so many outcomes, and most importantly, helps prevent tragedies like Sarah's from ever happening again. Turning back to Surrey, the member may know that part of my constituency is in Surrey County Council, and the Council has committed to implementing all the local recommendations in full. I share some of his concerns around the culture in that team and the need for joined-up services so children don't fall between the cracks. I would say, encouragingly, Ofsted's most recent inspection in 2025 highlighted some improvements at the front door of services. Inspectors noted that referrals to the children's single point of access received timely and proportionate responses, with effective partnership working with the police, particularly in the cases of domestic abuse and missing children. Multi-agency strategy meetings were found to be timely, well attended and leading to considered decisions. These are vital steps forwards and I welcome them. I have met the new lead member, Councillor Jonathan Hulley, about this matter. He is someone I have a great deal of personal confidence in, and he recognises the scale of change that is required in this area. Last month, I was heartened to see a motion calling for an independent expert review at Surrey County Council of the improvements made following Sarah's death was passed unanimously by Surrey County Council with cross-party support. That independent scrutiny is essential to providing confidence that reforms are effective, lasting and properly focused. I will be watching closely for its outcomes, as I know the Honourable Member for Woking will be, and I hope we can all embrace the cross-party approach of our county colleagues across Surrey and within the Council to drive sustained improvement. As well as Surrey, in my own constituency, I deal with children's services delivered by the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead and Slough Borough Council. I don't know whether I'm unique to have a situation where I have 3 different children's services. Ofsted rated the Royal Borough's services as good in October 24. Slough, by contrast, has been inadequate since early 2023, although subsequent focus visits, including in July 24, found that children in need and those on child protection plans were receiving timely and appropriate services. These neighbouring authorities illustrate a simple but uncomfortable truth. Children's services remain a postcode lottery. Where services are well led, outcomes can and do improve under the existing framework. Where they struggle, the causes are often leadership, capability and delivery on the ground, not the absence of legislative powers. That is why I think we should be careful and cautious about assuming that more legislation on its own will necessarily lead to better outcomes for children. But I do wish to talk briefly to the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill, which continues its passage in the other place. I welcome the Government's acceptance of several amendments responding to the recommendations from the Sarah Sharif review, particularly proposals to pilot meetings with parents before deregistration from school, and the option of a visit within 15 days of a child starting home education. However, there remain serious concerns. As drafted, the bill would not fully address the specific safeguarding loopholes identified in Sarah's case. Baroness Barron is doing excellent work in the law to close those gaps, and I hope the Government will think on some of those issues again. I do welcome the Government introducing unique child identification, as we have previously called for. More broadly, the principles of a children not in school register has long enjoyed cross-party support, as raised by the Honourable Member for Woking, and I'd be interested in the Minister's comments on that. Education matters and attendance at school should be the norm, but parental choice also matters. And elective home education is a legitimate option for many families. The bill, as it stands, does not strike the right balance. I've received numerous representations from constituents concerned that the proposals would place excessive and unnecessary burdens on responsible home educating families. The requirement to detail exact hours of education on pain of breaking the law is particularly intrusive and fails to reflect the reality of flexible home-based learning. Safeguarding measures must be proportionate, focused on identifying genuine risk, not creating layers of bureaucracy that stigmatise families who are doing the right thing. Finally, I urge the Government to go further in tightening the conditions under which a local authority may withhold consent for elective home education. Government Amendment 120, which applies where a child has been on a child protection plan within the last 5 years, does not go far enough. It should also consider whether a child has ever been subject to care proceedings, even where those proceedings did not result in a care order, as tragically was the case with Sarah. If this bill is to honour its stated purpose, it must focus relentlessly on protecting children at genuine risk, not on sweeping up responsible families into an overly prescriptive system. Getting this right matters. As we have heard here today, children's lives depend on it. Thank you.
Minister Josh McAllister.
Thank you, Mr Weston. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. I'd like to start by thanking the honourable member, my friend, the member for Woking, for securing this debate and his powerful and heartfelt contributions at the start of it. I've met with him on a number of occasions, and I'm sure I'll continue to meet with him and discuss these and related issues. I want to express my own deep sorrow at the tragic death of Sarah Sharif. Sarah, by all accounts, was a bright, happy girl who should have gone on to enjoy all the things in life that she had ahead of her. Instead, her life was brought to a brutal and painful end by the actions of her father and stepmother. In such circumstances, it is small comfort to know that those directly responsible for Sarah's death have been brought to justice and will spend most of the rest of their lives in prison. I'd like to pay tribute to all of those who gave evidence, and the evidence that ultimately proved beyond doubt that her death was the result of lengthy and increasingly sadistic abuse. But we must also reflect in this place, as set out in the local Child Safeguarding Practice Review report, that there were opportunities when Sarah's appalling mistreatment could have been identified and stopped. I will, and I've already committed to the honourable member, that I will be writing to him setting out the government's full range of actions directly in response to the recommendations of the LCSPR. I'd like to take a moment just to recognise the contributions of all those who've contributed to this debate. my honourable friend, the member for York Central, who rightly has praised the fantastic work of Martin Kelly and his team in turning around services in York. Beyond simply looking at the Ofsted inspection results, I know that there is a transformational change for children and families in that city that is down to the brilliant work that's been done by that team there. The member for York also rightly identified the concept of safe uncertainty. And I do think we've heard it in this debate today that we are trying to legislate for and resource a system that both needs to be able to act decisively when there is significant harm and also support families where there isn't significant harm but there are concerns, and get that balance right. And it does require practitioners to occupy a very difficult position of safe uncertainty, not knowing and holding competing hypotheses and ideas about what might be going on for a family in mind at the same time, and doing so in a calm, methodical and skilled way. The member for Tiverton and Honiton, the point about social work judgment, I think, neatly summarises that reflection. Devon's performance is an ongoing concern of mine. Devon has for far too many years not been able to reach a level of providing good enough services for children and families, and I welcome the summary he's given of some of the progress that has been made, particularly in workforce stability. I will be keeping a really close eye on that to make sure that we can get Devon to the point where it's no longer an intervention from the department, but that intervention will continue for as long as is necessary to get services to the place where his residents and children that he represents need them to be. And he, like so many other, mentioned residential care and the concerns around profiteering, and I'll return to those in a moment. My honourable friend for Stoke Central is absolutely right to highlight the situation where over 1,000 children are in care, and if we were to take a step back and ask whether some of those children, if we had the resources and the intervention available to support the family network, could some of those children actually be growing up with those who already love them and can keep them safe? And I'm convinced the answer to that question, as he is yes. He has raised with me before the offer, which I welcome, and the spirit in which it's given, of not being defensive about the challenges the city faces, whether the department can take a proactive approach in offering improvement support and doing that in a slightly different way. And I can confirm to him that yes, we will, and very happy to have further conversations with him. Similarly, with Ofsted, I want to make sure that their inspection framework and the Chief Inspector's approach is totally in line with the government's reform programme, and I'm pleased to confirm that that is very much work that's underway. The member for Guildford wants to write to me about the situations that she raised in further detail. I'd be very happy to look into that, and she's right to raise the crucial role of education in safeguarding children as part of that partnership. The member for Derbyshire Dales, as a foster carer, knows better than anyone in this room the importance of getting fostering rights so that we don't need to rely unnecessarily on residential care and all of the consequences of that. Also right to highlight the amazing work being done by Mockingbird Constellations to support foster carers. I would urge him to keep a close eye in the coming days on any announcements that may be positively welcomed on both of those fronts. The member for Dewsbury rightly highlighted the progress that's been made in Kirklees Council and stresses the need to fund further reform, which is the action that the government is taking with £2.4 billion to roll out the Families First programme. He raised the point around off-rolling in the Children Not in School Register. I'll return to that in a moment directly. The member, my honourable friend, the member for Middlesbrough South and East Cleveland, I would like to share my congratulations to the local Labour team and the children's social care staff there for the work that they've done in turning around those services. And like him, I want to take action to disrupt the broken care market, and I would encourage local partners in the Tees Valley and actually across the whole North East to come forward with proposals for a regional care cooperative that the government will certainly consider. The honourable member for West Dorset is right to highlight the rural dimension of much of this debate. I, like he, represents a rural constituency, and the way in which children's social care is delivered needs to reflect the benefits of dispersed access to services. And the Adoption Special Guardianship Support Fund, the government will be setting out very, very soon actions to give more certainty and improvements to that fund into the future, and I'll keep members abreast of those updates. The Honourable Member for Brecon, absolutely right to highlight the improvements not just in English local authorities but also his own Welsh constituency in Powys, and quite rightly highlighted the centrality of advocacy for children, particularly those in care. The member for Strangford, right to highlight the dimensions beyond just England, and in fact there are innovations in Northern Ireland that the UK government have brazenly stolen in support for children who are in residential care, where there's been models in Northern Ireland of step-down care and fostering that we've looked to bring here to the rest of the UK. And turning to directly answer some of the Liberal Democrat spokesperson's concerns, I appreciate the spirit in which she offered to work collaboratively with the government and highlight a number of the issues where I think the government has been listening and responded, not least in regard to the Children Not in School register, where we've laid a number of amendments to address the specific points around burdens for families. On funding, because the Liberal Democrat spokesperson quoted my report at me, I will quote my report back at her. I called for £2.6 billion of funding over a 4-year reform programme. I'm really proud to say that this government have invested and met that, and in actually some cases exceeded it. £2.4 billion for the Families First programme on top of previous spending, and then hundreds of millions of pounds to improve the care system. The job now is to make sure that that investment is spent really well and that it has a lasting effect. I recognise the point that my honourable friend makes about private special schools and the profit cap. We will be setting out the full range of reforms we'll be making to the special educational needs system in due course shortly, and we've heard the point that she has made on that. We are also and have announced £3 billion of capital spending for local authorities across England to increase special educational needs. And then finally, the opposition spokesperson and the scope of the Children Not in School register. Again, I appreciate the cross-party nature of his remarks. It is a challenging position to occupy to say there are both too many burdens on families and also advocate amendments which would dramatically widen the scope to more families of that Children Not in School register. It would cover, the current Conservative amendment in the other place, would cover all families who've ever had a child protection investigation, and under a third of those investigations identify significant harm. So it would be a significant widening of scope. I'd happily have a further conversation with him, but I would have concerns about the scope of that. In light of the time available, Mr. Chairman, I want to very briefly just summarise the action the government is taking specifically to address concerns about the child protection system in England. It is absolutely essential that we build a more confident, decisive and expert-led child protection response, learning not only from Sarah's appalling abuse, but also from many of the other children that have been referenced in this debate. We need to make sure that the Children Not in School register closes those loopholes where families are deliberately seeking to abuse their children. We need to build, as we are, multi-agency child protection teams that can bring agencies from across different services together in lockstep with the police, health and social care, making those judgments with only the most expert staff in those units. We're resourcing those and rolling them out as we speak. We need to make sure there's well-resourced family help provision in place for those families. Nationally, we've just finished the consultation for the Child Protection Authority. The national panel will be transferring to take on that function with a wider scope in light of Alexis Jay's report. My ambition with this is to make sure that we have, in as many cases as possible, where there is significant harm, a group of experts from across different services who can zoom in on that abuse and act really decisively with the family court system so that we have far fewer of these cases in the future, and that at a national level we're able to rewire information sharing, including through the single unique identifier, so that we don't end up in that situation in the first place. But I'll finish by thanking the Honourable Member for triggering this important debate.
Mr Will Forster to wind up.
Thank you, Mr Weston. It's been a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship today, and I want to thank you for chairing this debate. I called this debate for several reasons: to highlight the failures of Surrey County Council and call for their children's services to be put in special measures, to push for national changes to keep children safe, and give parliamentary colleagues the chance to raise their constituency stories about children's services in local authorities, and I believe I've done that. The government is taking action. The Children's Wellbeing Bill should make some progress on child safeguarding, but I urge the government to go further and faster in action to protect vulnerable children. And I'm pleased, and I want to thank everyone for their kind words earlier. I think we've had 15 speakers today. There are 15 recommendations of the Zara Sharif safeguarding report. I will continue to campaign to ensure Zara's legacy is she's the last person who was killed by people that should have loved and cared for her. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered children's services in local authorities. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Order, order. If members could depart reasonably promptly so we can move on to our next debate.